Hello and welcome to another episode of Acting Prime Minister with me, Paul Brand, the podcast where we pick the PM and ask a different guest each week to imagine themselves behind that Downing Street door. And after a fairly serious start to the year, a deadly virus, teetering on the edge of World War III, a mini royal abdication, we thought it was probably time for a laugh. And this week's guest has made a living out of turning politics into a joke. He's been a writer on Spitting Image, a panellist on Mock the Week. Now he's touring the country with his show Healing the Nation, the kind of material Boris Johnson can only dream of. Andy Parsons, welcome to Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you very much.
I'm still a bit nervous about this episode because I've got no idea what to expect.
Well, if you've got no idea what to expect, you're the interviewer.
I know, but
you
normally,
can lead this.
Well, normally when I interview politicians, I sort of know what they're going to say before they've said it.
It's a disappointment, that, isn't it? You quite like a few sort of, left turns and see what they throw you a few spanners.
Yeah, every now and then you get a surprise, but then that's a story, which is why they don't like surprises, because surprises become stories.
But surely story's a good thing, that gets them more publicity.
But it's whether it's good publicity, I suppose, isn't it?
All publicity.
But this is familiar ground for you because you have written a lot of comedy based on politics. You wrote for Spitting Image back in the day.
Yes.
What do you think is sort of the funniest time in politics that you've known? Because it's sort of died down a bit now. Is politics still funny now that it's all got a bit sort of,
well, now
big majority?
Now that you're getting the Ukrainian president is a comedian, it's all gone full circle, isn't it? This idea that because he was actually playing, wasn't he? The Ukrainian president.
Yeah.
He was playing the Ukrainian president in a TV soap, and now they obviously looked at him on the telly, thought, well, we don't like the politicians we've got. He's doing a good job on the telly. We will now make him the president.
Is it harder to satirise politics now that we've got this majority government, though? Because there was so much chaos last year that there was just so much material, I'm guessing, for
there was always, there is always a lot of material. No government is so well put together that there isn't a lot of things that they go wrong. And it's a big ship and things will go wrong. So, I'm not a man who subscribes to the idea that the more that goes wrong, the better it is for comedy. I would be very happy for this country to be run brilliantly, and then we could just talk about cats and dogs and the difference between men and women. But sadly, that's not the case.
All right, well, look, let's waste no time and let's send you through that Downing Street door and make you Prime Minister.
I'm very excited by this now.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've walked in, I've not tripped up on the way through or hit my head on the side or something.
It has happened. People have tripped up on the way into Downing Street.
Don't whistle, that's the other thing. Don't whistle as you go back through the door.
Yeah, David Cameron style.
Yeah.
So let's settle you into the Downing Street study to start with.
Where do you go in? Because I've never been inside. So do you go? Is there a study on the right, the left? What are you looking at as you go through?
So you go through the number 10 door and then you go through the there's a sort of reception area, a bit of a hallway. And then we're not invited into the Prime Minister's study. So do you know what? I don't know whether it is left or right.
Okay.
But there's a big staircase that you go up, which is where most of the reception rooms are upstairs, where they have their big kind of receptions.
Okay.
So let's imagine somewhere in there.
In there. Study. We're in there. Yeah.
And you're settling in. What's the picture, do you think, that you'd hang on the wall to inspire you as Prime Minister?
Are there a lot of pictures in there? Do you have a whole staircase? Is it all Prime Ministers down the staircase and in the...
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think I'd maybe just pick out the ones that were disappointing. Maybe like Theresa May, David Cameron, Anthony Eden, whatever. Pick whichever ones you want and have them in front of you. And every time you sat at that desk and you felt a bit of an imposter, you could look at some of the people who'd made a complete mess of it before you and think, well, maybe I won't do that bad a job.
I mean, it'd be hard to sort of have a rougher time than Theresa May, wouldn't it, I suppose?
Yes.
I don't want to be unkind to Theresa May.
I refuse to feel sympathy for her, but yes, I can see that things could have been more straightforward.
And what's the drink that you'd pour yourself as you're settling in?
So I'm guessing that you've just found out you've won. So it's going to be early in the morning, isn't it? So the temptation is you think, I can bring up from the cellar. I'm guessing there's a cellar for Downing Street. I don't know. I'm guessing there is. But bring me up a fine wine and let's celebrate this. But my guess is you'll probably be a bit knackered. So maybe save that for the day after and a little, I don't know, some sort of speciality tea and off to bed.
And what's the first call you'd make as Prime Minister? Who would you call?
All of your friends. Could you do that? Just, get it on the camera phone and just guide them around. This is what it looks like.
Just rub it in. I'm the Prime Minister now.
Hopefully they've seen it on the telly, but if not, guess where I am.
And first things first, you've got to appoint your cabinet.
Yes.
I'm guessing you'd have a pretty big clear out of the current cabinet.
I can't think of anybody. Maybe you could keep one and then ask them what they would do in a particular situation, and then hope that maybe that was a clue as to what you should be doing in the opposite direction. But yes.
Is there anyone that you'd love to get rid of to start with?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the Prime Minister, can I get rid of that? Because I'm already in there as Prime Minister.
You've already taken over his job,
so he's gone.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in the cabinet that you just think, they would be the first person I'd call?
I mean, it was one of those. If you know, in terms of the Conservative Party, it was. I would think for a lot of people, it was a lot of the people they most dislike within the Conservative Party are now in the cabinet. So we'll see what happens. We've got a reshuffle coming up in a couple of days, haven't we? So we will see how that pans out. Few people fighting for their jobs, by all accounts.
And is there anyone that you would love to appoint to the cabinet? You can literally have anyone in history. They don't have to be a politician. Is there anyone that you just think would be brilliant to have in the cabinet?
Well, Armando Iannucci would be quite handy, wouldn't it? Because he knows how not to run a government department. He's done the research, hasn't he? So he would be good. Hislop, he knows a bit, doesn't he, Mr. Ian Hislop?
Yeah. So you basically want to have a laugh at cabinet, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, but these people do know some stuff. They're not people who don't know anything.
True.
You think about, if you could have Jo Brand as Health Secretary, used to work as a psychiatric nurse, social care. She'd be very hands-on in that sense. And I mean, if you could have anybody in history, then maybe John Maynard Keynes would be quite handy as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yeah. Given that he's created his own brand of economics, then hopefully then we could, he would have a few answers for us, current predicaments.
And just to turn it around for a moment, is there anyone in politics that you think would make a really good comedian?
I did a podcast for a number of years called the Slacktivist podcast, and we did have a lot of people on, and those politicians who came on thinking that they were funny, almost without exception, died on their arse in front of the audience. They thought they were going to be funny, and because of that, they weren't. The ones who went best were the ones who just told stories, true stories about what had happened to them in politics, and people loved that.
Let's talk about your path to power now as well, your background story, in other words. So you actually studied law at Cambridge.
Yes.
And then decided to be a comedian.
Yeah, I went
because it's a more dependable career.
I went to a state school I went to a comprehensive in Cornwall, and then I went to a state grammar school in Devon. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to do a mixture of A-level subjects, sort of English, maths. But in the end, this wasn't available. The curriculum was small enough at this particular state school that wasn't available to have sort of mixed A-levels. So I had to do double maths, physics, chemistry. Then I wanted to do English at university, but they said, well, you can't do that. You've done double maths, physics, and chemistry for A-levels. So I was forced to do law, really. They said it was an in-between subject, and it was sort of in between sort of, extremely excruciating, dull and tedious, really. So when it came to it, I was basically doing very little law and doing a lot of acting was really what I did at university. So, and from there, I then did get a job with a law firm for about 6 months, but I kept on bunking off to try and write for the BBC, various non-commissioned stuff. And they realised that I wasn't that interested in the law, and then they told me that they were going to sack me, and then I'd obviously managed to do just about enough law that I realised they couldn't sack me. So they gave me redundancy instead. So I had 3 months redundancy, and hence I have now, been doing comedy for 30 years, but there's always in the background that, the threat of having to get a proper job and go and do something on a 9 to 5 basis.
And I watched, you made some election huddle videos.
Yes.
During the 2019 election. And I've seen a lot of your comedy, and I think it's fair to say that you supported the Remain campaign.
I did. I was quite heavily involved with People's Vote. I did. Yeah. I hosted their campaign launch, and I hosted a few things in Parliament Square. Some of the mass demonstrations. Was it the second biggest mass demonstration the country had ever seen? But it had about as much effect as the one against the Iraq War as things have worked out.
Didn't change anything in the end. But I just think it's sort of interesting that a lot of comedians tend to be on the left of politics, or they tend to have voted Remain.
It's less so now because the BBC, there was a big thing obviously a few years ago. How come comedians there aren't more right-wing comedians, and there are so many comedians now after the success of Live at the Apollo and all the rest of it, lots of youngsters coming in, seeing it as a proper career path. Where when you started doing comedy when I was doing it, you're an idiot. You know, there was no chance of making any sort of living on it. You only did it because you were trying to get away from law or whatever. So, but yes. Now there are quite a few right-wing comedians, and if you look back in the day, I suppose if you look at your Jimmy Tarbucks and your Jim Davidsons, there were a lot back in the day, and then but once you've actually got it changed things with alternative comedy, obviously, whatever exclamation marks you want to put around alternative. But yes, the things when it was supposed to be non-sexist, non-racist, the comedy scene changed, and all the stand-up clubs coming up.
Do you find it difficult, though, when you go into sort of Brexit-supporting areas, if you've got a lineup that tends to be a bit sort of pro-Remain?
I've been very happy that my audiences are very much half and half, and I'd be very disappointed if I only attracted, one part of the British population. So Healing the Nation, the show, is very much, it was designed that everybody, regardless of what they had voted in the referendum, could come along and there will be something in the show to enjoy. The idea that we transcend that one particular vote that we had.
And you are on tour pretty much every night until about June. I had a look at
we toured in the autumn. We had 3 months of touring in the autumn, and there was some healing to be done, obviously, and then we've had a general election, so there's a bit more healing to do. So yeah, we've got about another 50 dates around.
And how do you encourage the healing? Because that's what everyone wants to know now, going forward with Brexit. How do we bring the nation back together?
There were so many things that, people care about, everybody cares about. Everybody cares about the state of the health service, the state of the education service, what the housing's like, what the job situation's like. All those people care about those things. And so if we concentrate on those things, I've been involved as well with a campaign against loneliness. So this is, 9 million lonely people in the UK. I think most people will feel that the social care situation in this country is dire. Concentrating on those things that everybody agrees on and the things we can do to improve our communities, and also have a little look back in our history and feel good about some of the things that have gone on in the past and what hopefully might go on in the future.
And let's deal with some of the emergencies that'll be on your desk now then as Prime Minister.
We were having a drink, we'd only just got in and now we've got emergencies.
I know, well that's life as Prime Minister.
Is that
you
right?
don't get any time to get your feet under the desk.
Right.
So firstly, there are further cases of coronavirus confirmed in the UK as doctors warn that it's an epidemic in the making in the UK. How do you stop the spread of coronavirus in the UK?
Well, my wife is an epidemiologist.
Oh, really?
So she's very interested in the coronavirus. And yes, she's nervous. She's not sure that the facts coming out of China are fully accurate, shall we say. So yes, there's a long way to go on this one. So those people who had a Brexit cupboard and now thinking, we don't need the Brexit cupboard anymore. You may need a coronavirus cupboard. We'll see what happens. But yes, let's hope my wife's fears aren't as accurate as she thinks they may be.
And what about Donald Trump offering you a trade deal? What if he said, I'll give you a trade deal in return for putting chlorinated chicken in every school dinner in the country?
Right. Well, he said, didn't he? He said he wasn't interested in the NHS. He said he didn't know who the idiot was who'd first suggested that he might have been interested in the NHS. And then they checked that, didn't it? And it was actually him the last time he was here. So I'm not sure I trust Donald Trump. In fact, I know I don't trust. I was thinking about it. No, I don't trust him. So yeah, chlorinated chicken. I mean, chlorinated chicken is one of those where the EU have looked at it and stuff like that, haven't they? It's like the same as hormone beef. It's one of those horror things, but there are two sides to those stories. But yes, in terms of undermining, our safeguards and regulations, I'm not confident that a comprehensive trade deal with the US is necessarily going to happen anytime soon, shall we say?
Okay. And you've got to make your first speech as Prime Minister. We've heard a bit about your backstory, but what do you think is the sort of personal anecdote that you draw on to sum up your premiership? Because Prime Ministers have always got some, anecdote they pull from the past. Like I grew up in poverty or in a single parent household, or I was the son of an immigrant, or whatever it might be. There's always something there that they use as that spark.
I am vastly surprised to be standing here at a lectern in Downing Street. I wasn't expecting to. Please, if you could keep your crises at bay for a bit, there is a fine cellar downstairs which we would like to tuck into, and we would try and get everybody in for a nice little visit and share the wealth.
And is there some sort of personal anecdote in life that you
something
seize
that
on? Maybe something from your past that you think, right?
Very little.
This is good material.
Very little. I mean, I suppose in terms of the West Country, I was always very excited. We came up. I've only came up to London once in the first 18 years of my life, and I think I was age 10 coming up from Cornwall, and we actually got to stand outside the door of. And if you think in the late 70s, the idea that you could stand outside 10 Downing Street and have your photograph taken, with the security situation even then. Yeah. But now you can't even see the door, can you? It's just like
the gates.
The gates, and it sort of. So I suppose from. There's some extrapolation of being excited by the bright lights, and then suddenly to only have had this one opportunity to even sort of touch the black glossiness, and I'd make something of those things.
Did that spark an interest in politics for you? Because obviously you write about politics quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we were all very excited just to be out on a coach trip to London. You can imagine coming up from Cornwall, and as I say, it was the only time I got up to London until I went to university. So yeah, we were very excited, but I think we were just as excited by the Tower of London and people being sort of beheaded and crown jewels and all the rest of it. I don't think it made a particular impact.
And there are serious issues that you've campaigned on too. You mentioned earlier about the campaign to end loneliness. You made this brilliant video where you sat down in a shopping centre, I think it was, and you just sort of talked to people to try and get them to talk to each other. And
it was weird because they approached me and they said, look, we've got 9 million lonely people. That's increasing. The idea that everybody's seems to be very well connected, they've got their phones or whatever, but actually we're talking much less face to face, and that those little interactions that you have with other members of the public that you weren't expecting as you go about your daily lives, just a little chit chat here and there, we're doing much less of that, they were saying. Would you go along to one of our big shopping centres and just see if you can talk to people? And I was very nervous to do that, just sidling up to people. Obviously if you're on stage talking to people, it's a very different thing than actually just wandering up to people and trying to engage them with conversation. They were going to film it with hidden cameras around, and we did it, and we did it for 4 hours, and literally everybody we spoke to was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I say this with a sort of surprise to people, and they're always sort of, they go, well, they would be with you because they know you. And sadly, it wasn't as often the case as I would have liked. There was a lot of people who had no clue who I was, and they were still lovely, Yeah. And even if they had known who I was, there was always a chance they weren't going to be lovely. So no, it was great. And the irony, of course, the video is now it's sort of snowballed. It's had over, I think, 6 million views worldwide or whatever. And the irony being that something that was designed very much to encourage less screen time has had a lot of screen time, but it's sort of gratifying as well.
And I'm asking you about this because you can pass any law as you want as Prime Minister.
Yes. So
is there some law that you particularly like to pass? Maybe it's about loneliness, or maybe it's about something else, I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I think if my big bugbear is certainly, I mean, in terms of the hollowing out of the services, if you think about the, social care or councils, what have they had their budgets cut almost in half in the last 10 years. So yeah, I would, child poverty, we got, was it 500,000 less in the last 10, 500,000 more kids in poverty, 4 million children in the country in poverty. So I would very much want to see equality would be something that I would be particularly interested in, and services for people in need.
How did you feel after the election result? Because again, it feels to me as if your politics is definitely on the left, and now we've got a Conservative majority.
Well, sadly, having done these 50 gigs around the country, we've got a pretty good idea as we were going around the country in the autumn how things were going. And
that's interesting. Could you kind of sense the way the audience was
Yeah.
moving
We knew that "Get Brexit Done" wasn't going to be the worst slogan that anybody had ever come up with. And sadly, from the Labour Party's point of view, they weren't succinct in a way that they needed to be. It was almost. Their motto was almost, let's get everything done and we can do it all in 10 years and then we can have a 4-day week. And people just didn't trust them on that. It was almost like policy diarrhea from the Labour Party, and that that one focus on what they were going to do. And Johnson kept on with that script, and however boring it was for political journalists, for the people at home, it definitely cut through.
Yeah. Can you sense that then in an audience in terms of maybe the jokes they laugh at and the jokes they
Very
don't
much
laugh at,
so, yeah.
as to which way politically they're leaning?
Yeah, no, you go out and do it, and you say what you feel and what your opinions are, and then if you're doing it night and night, you just know as you go around the country. And people always think, it's going to be very different in the north than the south, and the southwest and the southeast, but generally, there was a lot of, similar reactions across the board. The show didn't have to change whether we were doing it up in, Stockton or Newcastle or whether we were doing it in Guildford.
And who tended to get a bigger laugh then? Jokes about Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, no, I mean, it was interesting. If you're picking on political characters, everybody was happy at, Conservatives, as you can imagine, very happy to laugh at Boris Johnson because a lot of them aren't a Boris Johnson supporter or, they will Remain supporters or what have you. So it becomes more tense when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the policies and what you would do. People, in terms of monetary policy or what have you. But certainly in terms of characters, it's pretty much fair game.
Okay. All right, let's just finish off with a bit of a quick fire round.
Okay, quick fire.
So as Prime Minister, who would you rather be interviewed by, Piers Morgan or Emily Maitlis?
Very much Emily Maitlis. Yeah, no, I've been invited on Good Morning Britain, so far resisted. So, yeah.
All right. We can't say too much, it's an ITV show and we're very supportive of Piers on this podcast.
Well, you can be as supportive as you like, but as I remember rightly, he doesn't do the entire week. Did he not start off doing the week and they gradually cut him down? So, yeah, I feel for Susanna Reid, but yes.
Well, maybe you could go on Good Morning Britain on a Thursday or Friday.
Well, didn't Angela Rayner do that? And then she was accused of avoiding Piers Morgan, but I think that's a very sensible move.
Who would you invite to Downing Street first? President Trump of America or President Xi of China?
Is it in my hands to invite one or other than first?
Yeah, you can choose.
Well, I suppose if I'm choosing, I'm not sure that I'm desperate to have either of them there, but likewise, you need a relationship with both of them, don't you? So I guess I don't believe in the special relationship. I think it's only a very one-sided relationship. But I guess in terms of, it's probably sensible if you're sharing a lot of information in terms of intelligence with the Americans, you have them first, and then we see how this 5G stuff goes, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting with the Chinese, isn't it? We don't want them to be part of our 5G network in terms of the core component, but we're quite happy to let them build the next nuclear reactor in this country. That's
true.
Yeah, 2,000 megawatt nuclear reactor, they can cause a nuclear core meltdown or whatever, but they will know nothing of the survivors WhatsApp group that we have set up afterwards.
What would your Downing Street pet be?
Downing Street pet? Well, I'm not good with cats, so Larry might have to go next door to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And we had a dog as a kid, but I can't imagine it's easy to get out and walk the dog necessarily in central London. So tropical fish was my other big one, but it was a bit too much work for me. I thought I'll pick the pet that's got the least amount of work, and then even just changing the water every week was too much. But I'm guessing if you're in Downing Street, you get a chance to maybe have somebody come in and look after your tropical fish for you. Yeah. And maybe you can even have a shark in there, do your little your James Bond villain thing. So anybody of the cabinet ministers who aren't behaving, you could threaten to send them into the shark room.
It was like Gavin Williamson when he was chief whip, had a tarantula on the desk. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, it was a slightly weird story. He seemed a bit too pleased with the fact that he owned his own tarantula, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And where would you be pictured on holiday as Prime Minister, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, having a background in Cornwall, it would be quite nice to be pictured in Cornwall. But then David Cameron sort of sullied that for a lot of people with his frisbee antics. But maybe rather than some sort of posh old Etonian coming back from Chipping Norton or whatever, it could just be, a local lad coming home. So that might be nice.
Yeah, that'd be a good story.
Yeah.
What do you think is the scandal that would bring you down as Prime Minister?
Well, I'm a big fan of holidays, and they don't go down well, do they? Prime Ministers, he wasted his time, the country's burning, how come he's off swanning around in the sunshine?
Yeah, I feel like maybe you're stitching yourself up a bit here, because you've said that you'd invite everyone around for a drink to start with.
Yeah.
You'd install a fish tank.
But that could go both ways, couldn't
holiday.
It? Yeah. What's wrong with a fish tank? Is there anything
There'd
wrong
be
with
some freedom of information request about how much it costs, or,
Yeah.
You can't
well,
have a fish
given
tank
the trees that they've got in Portcullis House or whatever, however much they cost, I don't think a tropical fish tank is too bad.
And lastly, would you ever want to be Prime Minister, do you think? Or would you ever want to be an MP or stand for Parliament?
it's always, you think, superficially attractive in the sense that, you think 10 Downing Street, there's worse addresses to live in London, aren't there? And you get to meet lots of very interesting people. And the idea that the policies you think are important, then you get to put them into place. But looking at the prime ministers, having looked at them over a number, they all look so much more haggard, don't they, when they leave than when they started.
Yeah.
They like age in dog years.
Yeah.
And there's always that element where you think, one more, crisis or whatever, and you suspect their hind legs are going to go or something. So it's one of those where you think actually maybe the most fun is maybe coming up with lots of policies that you'd like to do, shouting about them from the stage and getting people to laugh about them is actually maybe more sort of rewarding, and you can spend half the year away on holiday, provided you haven't got two small kids. But in the past, you go touring all the way around the world, and if you want to go and off and play the odd game of cricket, or if you want to go and watch a football match, there's nobody going, well, he should be at his desk sorting out the coronavirus.
Yeah, you've still got the best of both worlds. You can be a bit political on stage and still have a life.
Yeah, and nobody's too intrusive in terms of exactly what's going on. Not that it, maybe our Prime Minister, he's had a fair amount of intrusion, but it doesn't seem to have bothered the general public too much, does it?
I don't think there's any level of intrusion that would necessarily change anyone's mind about Boris Johnson now.
Well, you hope that there will be. We just wonder what it is. Obviously not going to be easy for his current girlfriend to kick him out of his current house, but it'd be quite good fun if she tried, wouldn't it?
God, yeah, I wonder what would happen in that scenario.
It'd be brilliant. If he goes out to make a little speech at the lectern, right, and then he tries to go back in and she's triple bolted it behind him.
Change the locks.
That would be fantastic.
There's a black bag on the step.
Well, you just see it whilst he's making the speech, but he doesn't know what's going on.
Andy Parsons, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and a good laugh as well.
Excellent, thank you.